God began to call us to minister in Israel last September. And he had a miraculous way of calling us into this ministry. And since then, he's been stirring our hearts, and he's been moving on us and preparing us for a trip to the Holy Land this June. And we've been excited, we've been praying, we've been trying to make all the necessary arrangements to go. But all of our striving and all of our efforts have failed. Every time we thought we could get ahead, something would happen and the vehicle would break down. And our business wasn't bringing in the money that it had been before, and everything was kind of crashing down around us. And God always provided the needs that we had, and we never went without. But to try to figure out how to come up with $7,000 extra just was outside of my scope of faith. We've heard many times growing up in church that if God calls you to something, he's going to provide. And so many times I've seen it happen for people. But for me, I don't know if I believed it for me. I tried to work as hard as I could and try to figure out a way to come up with the money, and all of my efforts seemed very futile. And it didn't seem like there was anything I could do to provide the finances for this trip. And as the dates began to draw closer and closer, the Spirit of God began to say to us that he didn't want us to provide the finances for this trip. He wanted to provide the finances for this trip. And that was a huge step of faith for me to trust that. As a man, I start freaking out. And yet the whole time I'm coming to church here, and I'm hearing the messages of God's provision, of miracles, and I'm praying prayers like, God, in this situation, let it be done on earth like it is in heaven. And let me walk in that, God. Let me walk in your provision, and let me have faith to believe that you can do this. So I began to grit my teeth and tell people, yeah, we're going to Israel in 6 weeks. We're going to Israel in 5 weeks. We're going to Israel in 4 weeks. And at that time, by the 4-week marker, we needed to come up with $4,000.
We still knew we were going, but we were really stressed out, really wondering, when is this going to happen? And we've said it a million times, he's always on time. And we were really at that point where God was choosing to be just on time. And so we went up for prayer that Sunday, and at the end they said, we know God's going to provide this week. And so we walked away just encouraged, and at the same time just really wondering, okay, this week, $4,000, how is that going to happen? We can't raise that. There's not enough hours in the day. And at that point, we hadn't asked anybody to give financially, and really didn't want to. We're not against missionaries itinerating, but for us, it's just a hard thing to do. And so we felt like that's the only thing we haven't done. So let's put this letter together and send it out and finally ask people to partner financially. We wrote our letter and tried as much as possible to convey our hearts and put together what we think was a beautiful email, what we felt was a great letter, and our computer crashed and we couldn't send it that night. And the next morning I woke up early trying to retrieve all of our contacts, trying to retrieve our letter, trying to retrieve our pictures, everything. Got it all loaded, and the computer crashed again. And I called my mom that morning, and I just cried. And she said, Rebekah, you're going to Israel. You're going to Israel because this has been your dream. But it's not just your dream, it's God's dream for you, and you are going to Israel. And I hung up with her, and I prayed, and I cried, and about an hour later, I got an email and a message on my phone that there was somebody wanting to sponsor us for half of our airfare. And right there, I knew God was answering. Right there, I knew that things were set in motion, that our prayers were answered, that there was breakthrough in the heavenlies. About a half hour later, I got a text from my sister. Again, we hadn't asked for anyone to partner with us financially at this point, but she texted me. She said, I wish I could give more, but I put a check in the mail for $500. Oh my goodness. I was beginning to live out in just that short amount of time what I knew God could do, but He had never done for us yet. And after that, about 2 hours later, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who I hadn't spoken with since November. She called and said, "Rebekah, I just got out of my prayer closet. I got to come over and give you something." And so she walked in, and we sat down and talked. She handed me a check, and I didn't look at it. And so we were talking about different things going on in her life. And I glanced down at the coffee table and saw the check for $1,000. And right there was the completion of what we needed for our airline tickets. And so she left the house, and I just cried, and I worshiped, and I praised the Lord, because we saw a miracle. There's no other word for it. We saw a miracle happen. We kind of did a little bit of math, and our plan is to drive our girls, we have 2 daughters, drive them to California to stay with my parents while we're gone, and then fly out of LAX. And so we totaled up what we needed there, and we needed $1,000 still.
Other people that we had that we were friends with and we visited just last Sunday gave us $770 just as a love gift that they knew that we were trying to go, but we had not asked anybody for funds at that point. And he said God laid it on our heart to give, and so they gave $770, and we were able to sell something actually we had a rummage sale, and the whole thing got rained out, but we sold one thing for the $230 that we needed. That raised all the funds in 1 week. This has just been a testimony of God's provision in a miraculous way. There were a lot of ways He could have done it, but He wanted to get the credit, and He wanted to get the glory, and He wanted to humble me, and He wanted to teach me to know Him on a more miraculous level. He wanted to increase my faith, and He wanted me to believe in Him more. I love the Lord, but He wanted me to believe in Him more. And I'm not the same today as I was 2 weeks ago. I'm changed forever. I have more faith today. I believe in miracles more. And I have to in order to fulfill the call of God on my life.
In everything, in raising all of these finances and in going to the land, God did it. Because our efforts fell to the floor. They fell to the wayside. God did it. And we're leaving June 10th. We're leaving June 10th for California to take the girls. We leave June 12th out of LAX for Tel Aviv. And when we step foot on the land, we are going to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God worked miracles.